Okay, welcome Patriot One investors. I'm your host, Lisa Paglia, and we appreciate you taking the time to join us today for our regular quarterly webcast to shareholders. Today's format will include an interview about the state of the business with CEO Peter Evans, some insights into what's driving security purchasing decisions, followed by a Q&A session based on questions our investors sent in prior and during this webcast. We received over 200 questions from our shareholders. Many followed along similar themes. During this event, we'll attempt to address the bulk of those questions as time allows. Before we begin our presentation, let me caution you that our discussion today will include forward-looking statements. These statements may relate to future events, and results are based on management's current views and expectations. There can be no assurances that such statements will prove to be accurate, and actual results in future events could differ materially from those anticipated in such statements because of a number of risks, uncertainties, assumptions, and other factors, many of which are beyond the control of the company. The forward-looking statements contained in this presentation are made as of today, and the company will update or revise publicly any of the included forward-looking statements only as expressly required by applicable law. So with that, let's get started. Peter, it's been another busy quarter for the Patriot One team. Would you like to give investors an update on what you've been up to?
Yeah, absolutely. And Lisa, it's great to see you again. So thanks for joining us today and helping us through this, and working with us with our investors. Wow. Since our last webcast, the business has progressed significantly. I personally don't know if I've ever been this busy in my entire career. It's just been a fabulous experience so far. You'll notice in the background behind me, we're actually coming live from a stadium. You can see like camera crews up there and all this kind of good stuff. And it's yet another busy week. We hope this environment that we're in today and the work that we're doing today with this customer is actually going to be a future customer, right? And based on critical conversations we had their executive team this morning, I'm feeling very confident about that. These kinds of activities. There's a lawnmower going in the background. Hope that's not a problem. These kinds of activities are actually really, really important step in kind of the sales cycles, getting on site, getting engaged. And, the customers need to see the product live and in action, like learning and understanding how it fits in their environment. This stadium alone has I think 7 different entrances, which all have different unique requirements. So understanding how it fits in their environment, how to optimize their security processes, and learning how the capabilities best fit them to optimize their overall patron experience. From our point of view, we've had a huge uptick, maybe 3 to 4 times as many in the numbers of customers requesting these kinds of demonstrations, both in controlled environments and at live events than we did last quarter. So I'm really pleased with things there. If I take inventory of where we were maybe 6 months ago when we did the first one of these webinars, frankly, 6 months ago, we really were nowhere with the major leagues. Now, we're known to everyone, right? We've seen a lot of advanced activities. Seen as kind of one of the most advanced and innovative solutions out there when it comes to efficacy of detection of weapons, which is the primary reason we exist, right, in the market today. We've been traveling as a team all across the country and our pace for demonstrating these kinds of scenarios like we're going to see this week. I think we're doing about 2 of these a week now, with major organizations. So really pleased with that. These, in our opinion and the customer's opinion, these product demonstrations are a really critical step in the sales cycle. There's multiple steps in the sales cycle, but in that process, for them to broadly adopt our solutions. And I think we're at an inflection point. Again, thinking back to where we were to the types of engagements we're having now, because we've got these really live opportunities to showcase our products and change the narrative with the customers as they start to think about more seriously the deployments. Yeah, a lot of our investors, and Lisa, I'm sure you've seen these too. You've seen the videos at the NBA events we've done. You saw the Cleveland Browns one. As I said, we've been doing about 1 or 2 of these every single week in that period of time. We haven't posted them all. We obviously need permission to post them. And obviously there's a competitive environment that we operate in. So why tip off the competition, right? But we've been at PGA events. We've been at live concerts. I was at a concert last weekend for one of the most popular bands in the environment these days. Demonstrating our technology. We've been to the pro leagues. It's really been a very busy 90 days. Each of these demonstrations are executed as part of the multiple stages and steps in the evaluation process. So it's been great, Lisa. We're doing really well.
Oh, that's amazing. Well, so now that you've had the chance to showcase the solution in a live environment, or live environments, I should say, What have you been seeing in the market, and how is that affecting Patriot One's sales prospects?
Yeah, well, that's a very interesting question because the market is changing almost daily and weekly. Like, as everyone knows, if you watch the news, we live in an environment that's getting more and more volatile all the time. Look at all the unruliness that's happening on airplanes. That same thing is happening in these stadiums, happening in every kind of environment you can imagine. And there's this increased frequency in things going on, like fights, and an intolerance around those fights. And those fights are actually getting into like a longer duration. I had a conversation with one of the NFL executives about 2 weeks ago, and he was telling me what they'd normally expect is a fight would last like 2-3 punches, right? Now these things are brawls, and they involve tens and 20s of people. And nobody wants a knife in a stadium when you're getting into that kind of a situation. And so there's a higher degree of interest and rigor around those kinds of weapons. We fit that very well. It's a unique differentiator for us. But this whole thing is forcing the venues to kind of rethink their business model and the types of security protocols that they have to implement as you've got this accelerating unrest, right? Securing points of entry with security guards, like that no longer holds up in today's environment. And you need the kind of innovation that technologies like ours are actually doing to kind of help augment, the personnel and actually help, provide preemptive security. We've also seen some really interesting environmental feedback, directly from our customers as they try to address these problems. They've got like an extreme shortage of security staff, right? For whatever reason, due to COVID, due to other things, right? There's this problem of getting people and enough people. And this isn't unique to our industry. Everyone's experiencing this industry, not just security, right? On top of that, nobody wants to be a security individual these days, because as you've got more and more unruly fans, that puts you in an awkward position where you're going to be the next YouTube video, right? As they try and manage these unruly crowds. Nobody wants that. So you've got these interesting forces at play. We've also got a scenario that we've seen from all these engagements of aging infrastructure. Many of the stadiums, like the one I'm in today, these were built sometimes before, security acts and safety standards like the DSA Safety Act were put in place, and people needed walk-through metal detectors. And they just don't have the footprint to be able to put in enough walk-through metal detectors, right, to address those higher security needs, which are getting more and more tight as we get more and more of this unruliness. We're also seeing, a lot of organizations really grapple with how they deploy the solution in an environment where there are all these social concerns. We're getting a lot of people pushing back. They no longer want to have their personal privacy invaded. They no longer want to have to divest of all the personal items. And people are resisting that and saying, get out of my way, on this privacy issue. So, walk-through metal detectors are 100% invasive. Everyone gets inspected, and people are resisting that now. So all these things, kind of bode well for us. Layered on top of this, COVID's been a challenge, and we've heard this before, but it's a different kind of challenge right now. While we're able to directly engage the stadiums and get on site like I am today, right? Our customers are dealing with a whole new set of mandates. All of a sudden, they now have to verify that people are vaccinated, otherwise they're not allowed in the stadiums. Fans who don't know this are surprised and they're angry. And these COVID standards that are saying we must have to scan for COVID vaccinations, right? That's new. And there's no kind of standard policy yet. So the policies are changing all the time. This is a completely new challenge where the stadiums would just have to go and scan for weapons, scan for tickets. Now they have to scan for weapons, tickets, COVID, make sure that people actually have their certifications for COVID vaccination. So this has almost doubled the requirement for security operations and security processes. And it's something they never had a model for before. They may have had a model for ticketing or walk-through metal detectors, but this is new and it's distracting and grabbing all the attention. And with all that, the standards change. I was at an event, and over the course of 2 days, right, what was the policy around COVID verification changed one day to another, and the stadiums had to scramble. So that's become a new priority that's causing a little bit of a challenge for the industry overall, right? So these protocols are changing day to day. The result of all this is the venues now have multiple screening things going on at each event. They're scanning for weapons, for tickets, for COVID and vaccination status, and they're dealing with unruly crowds. This bodes well for us as Patriot One because we can help address part of that, but also can slow things down a little as they have to navigate through these things.
Thanks, Peter. Could you talk next a bit about any advancements with the Patriot One technology?
Yeah, sure. It's been a good quarter for us. It's been a quarter of acceleration along many, many different aspects, okay? We saw some announcements, and I'm sure investors saw some announcements around things like our mobile alert center, and continued enhancements as part of our journey to constantly improve the overall technology, right? We announced some new capabilities that we've delivered, which have actually allowed us to lower our false positive rates in the range of about 70 to 90% from what we were doing before. We were in like low single digits before, but that's never good enough. And we always want to keep improving more and more and more. Now, how much that false positive rate gets improved is really environmentally dependent, depending on the security levels that they're looking for, depending on the environment itself. But it's a continuous journey, and our commitment to our customers is we're constantly going to continue to improve, because that will help them manage their overall security operations. Those same innovations will also set a foundation for some upcoming announcements that we're going to do and further innovations as we get further through this quarter. It's also been a quarter of acceleration in many other avenues, right? Particularly in terms of things like certifications and product validation, right? We had the opportunity to run a number of red teaming events, right, and evaluations on behalf of the NBA. And so for those who aren't familiar with red teaming, you bring in a third party who takes you through multiple tests to indeed validate that you meet certain security standards, right? We did this in conjunction with the NBA. These third-party tests let us showcase our solution to all those executives from the league, and to various other executives and organizations and things like that. The results that we'll be publishing soon, right? We were able to catch more of the prohibited items on the prohibited items list that are required by these leagues, right? And actually demonstrate that our technology could outperform the current security technologies at the required level that these leagues have stated as their minimum necessary, and better than the products they're currently using. Right, on the screen here, we just got a quick example. What you see is a whole list of various products, right? Essentially, if you look at across the top, these were things that at the top row, the walk-through metal detectors couldn't catch, right? I don't know about anyone else, but I don't want some of these knives going into a stadium, particularly when you're getting fights and violence that involve 20, 30 people in a brawl, okay? Other than the item that was in green here, the yellow and pink, which are plastic, right? No one's invented technology to scan for plastic yet. We were able to catch all of these items. That's a unique differentiator. It's why we're getting such high interest from the leagues that, aha, we finally have a solution that provides us better security than we had before, with a much faster, frictionless entry for our patrons. So, this bodes very well for us as we continue to walk down the path of things like DHS Safety Act certification. Okay. We know that many people are interested in this whole idea of fast and frictionless entry. Our strategy has always been security first. We don't want to lower the security level while we're actually delivering fast and frictionless. So let's make sure we're checking that box first, right? To just focus on fast and frictionless, right? That'd be like telling a state and actually lowering the security standards and security capabilities. That would be like telling someone you can drive a Formula One race car and you can drive at 250 miles an hour, but you know what? There's no brakes, there's no airbags, there's no seatbelts. That's a crash that's waiting to happen, and it's not going to be pretty when it does happen, right? So we've also done, to complement those red teaming events, we've done a number of third-party bake-offs that have been run on behalf of the customers. There's actually customers running these themselves. In all cases, we won those third-party bake-offs, very, very pleased with the results. And we've actually started one of our first deployments with one of those customers who selected us after a bake-off. And we're currently negotiating with them what the phased rollout will look like for many of their commercial properties, right? So in summary, it's been a great quarter for acceleration in terms of customer engagements, certifications, and technology releases. And I'm really, really pleased with what the engineering team has been doing and delivering.
Excellent. Well, it sounds like an amazing time, and with the potential for significant opportunity ahead. Peter, can you also talk about some of the challenges you see and how you and the team plan to address them?
Yeah, so Lisa, great question. You're trying to catch me on both sides of the equation here, so let's do that, okay? Okay, so let's be very open and transparent with our team. The world isn't perfect, right? The other side of the equation is, while we've got great acceleration, there's been some things in the quarter that have delayed. And for those who know me, that know I'm monumentally impatient with achievement. This drives my team crazy sometimes, but hey, it is what it is, right? It's a frequent question asked by our investors. If things are going so well, why aren't people buying, okay? And I share that frustration a little bit. It's not due to lack of performance of the product that you get the opportunity to go dance with the NBA. You don't do that if your product doesn't work, right? So let's just take that question off the table. Works really, really well. The reality is that, like all the companies, when they adopt technology, they go through these rigorous evaluation processes. You're changing your whole security operations. Nobody wants to do that, and all of a sudden an incident occurs, right? So they're going to make sure they're going to take us through. Okay, let's go through, an organized demo. Then let's go through tests on site. Then let's validate the certifications. Okay, now let's do some evaluation in a small controlled environment with a small amount of traffic and fans. Okay, let's learn from that and then go do it again with a larger group of fans. Now let's learn from that and refine our security operations. You learn from one event and you start to build out your plans for the best deployment, best application of staff, best application of processes before you actually completely flash cut over, right? These technology decisions are much more complex and they require a complete change of kind of the operating procedures, right? And that takes place over time to kind of determine that. So like I personally kind of have to keep reminding myself, look, it was only 2 quarters ago that we started on this journey, right? 2 quarters ago, we took a hard look at the business, hard look at the industry. We evaluated all the segments, kind of in the January, February timeframe. And we said, okay, this is our target industry we're going after. This is the market that's got the most need and the most appeal and best alignment for us, right? So we generated the content, we developed the leads, we generated the context. We weren't talking to any one of these pro leagues at that time, right? We connected with these individuals, introduced ourselves, started running targeted marketing campaigns and getting our first meetings. The next quarter, well, now with those meetings, we started to talk about deployments. We started to talk about demos. We started to talk about pilots. We started to do site surveys and things like that and started to get tests and validations, right? And getting feedback, frankly, on things that they said, we need these features in order to deploy in volume, okay? So we had a first quarter of good successes of targeting, a second quarter of good successes. I would have liked to close a lot more deals in that sort of second quarter timeframe. The reality is, right, some of those opportunities we expected to close in the first quarter, they didn't, or sorry, the second quarter, they didn't. But they haven't gone away. It just took a little longer than I would have liked, right? But most of those either paused while they continue to work through details, or we're working on agreements that they'll close in the first fiscal quarter, which is now, or next fiscal quarter of the year. So I'm really pleased that things are happening and happening well. I'm just a little impatient. Would have liked them to happen a little bit sooner, right? Also, we saw some delays due to COVID. All of a sudden, these mandates to reopen require these mandates that you have to inspect everyone's vaccination card, okay? That required entirely new solutions and forced the customers to rethink their security processes, and that became the priority for them, right? So it kind of paused a little bit of their analysis of our solutions, right? The other thing that's really kind of slowing down and bothering me a bit is DHS certifications are slower than I would like, right? And the reasons for that were kind of out of our control. The DHS is inundated right now with the requests and all sorts of other activities. And what would be a normal sort of 1 to 2 quarter turnaround is sometimes taking much longer. So we're going to work on that process with them and keep on pushing on it as hard as we can, right? So, I guess I would love for, like all the investors, we go in, we see a customer, he sees our technology, goes, wow, I'm going to buy today. The reality is life doesn't quite work that way. And there's a lot of other factors that we have to navigate our way through, right? The good news is none of the customers have gone away. It's just taking a little longer than personally I would have liked.
Okay. Oh, thanks for that insight, Peter. Can you then share a little bit about what investors can expect, I should say, in terms of the company's drive to increase the stock price?
Yeah, as we've talked about in some of the prior webinars, I'm a big believer in building value in the company, right? Now that we actually have momentum with customers, we got references with the kinds of customers everyone would want to have as a reference. It's time for us to kind of relaunch our investor relation program and start reaching out in a very programmatic way to institutional investors. I'm primarily targeting, quite frankly, into the US, both for retail as well as institutional investors. We haven't done that very much previously, right? And frankly, the company did that for too long. And frankly, we used up all of our marketing capital in the process, going out and marketing the stock, but not having any proof points behind it. Now that we have the proof points, we can point to valid deployments with referenceable customers, it's time for us to start that process again, right? We'll increase the awareness, we've got increased customer demand, and we can actually point to customers who are deploying and will be references to validate our vision of what we're delivering into the industry. And so we're starting that process and now speaking to institutional investors, and retail investors to help increase the demand for our stock, which then should in turn drive up demand, drive up the stock price.
Understood. Thanks, Peter. Well, we have quite a few questions from shareholders. So are you ready to dive in?
Yeah, let's go for it. I've been a little long-winded here, so we'll try and make these quick. I'm sorry, Lisa.
No, no worries. This is
If
good.
nothing else, you can tell I'm passionate. Okay.
Absolutely. Well, we have quite a few to go through, and there were some common groups of questions around key topics. So let's first talk about the market opportunity and expansion plans. We had a number of questions specific to this area. First up, the market for security technology is gigantic. What are your goals for the U.S. market share over the next 5 years?
Yeah, that's a really complex answer here, Lisa. And by the way, that mowing machine, that's not making too much background noise.
No,
I'm
no,
serious. It's loud.
sound
Uh,
great. Sounds good.
okay. So look, that's a complex question, and it really comes down to something I'm a big believer with, which is getting like really good product market alignment, perfect fit. Okay. And so it's a very, very large market. When you think about schools, stadiums, casinos, shopping malls, commercial properties, churches, manufacturing, distribution centers, all these kinds of things. Like all of those markets, though, have very, very unique characteristics. It's a different, unique application and some nuances for the product to go into a school than into, say, an auto manufacturer. Okay. Certain markets are more appealing than others because of the environments, how you're selling them, the channel requirements, maybe certifications required, like to sell into the federal government. You have to be on the GSA schedules and things like that, right? So, some are more appealing than others for us to pursue. We've selected certain markets that we think are the best fit for us right now, and that we can try and generate revenue as quick as we can and sales as quick as we can, right? So our objective, when we think about it, is like, I personally don't like to be third or fourth in a marketplace. I want to be the largest market shareholder in the segments that we have consciously and specifically chosen to participate in. Okay. We can't be everything to everyone, right? But we can be the right thing and the obvious choice to those markets that we want to serve well. Okay. Our analysis shows overall, look, the market's about $116 billion or so based on the analysis. That's for everything global, right? If we narrow the focus down to those places that we think we can absolutely dominate, that's about a $4.6 billion market. 10% of that alone, that would be interesting.
Mm-hmm.
I don't like 10%, right? Right. I think it was Jack Welch from GE said, if you're not number one or number two, get out of the market, right? So my intent is to be number one and over 50% in the market that I'm choosing to participate in, and be known as the very best provider with all the customers, telling all the other customers, these are the guys, right? As we grow, we'll move into adjacent markets that have similar sort of properties, but a little bit uniqueness, and we'll kind of move into those adjacencies, sort of like hitting one bowling pin, and then it knocks down the next one, the next one, the next one, the next one, right? And that'll increase our target market share to about $30 billion or so. And we see that over a couple of years kind of growing into those spaces.
All right, excellent. Well, so then shifting gears just a bit, can you talk about what's happening with the production facility for assembly, testing, and packaging of the product? Is the existing facility expanding?
Yeah, well, good news. We continuously are looking at demands, forecasts. Now we've got a more rigorous sales process in place. We've increased our manufacturing with contract manufacturing companies. I think we've got 2 of them to augment our capabilities. They have more than enough capacity to serve the demand that we are forecasting over the next 2 years for our products.
Okay. So there were a number of questions on sales performance. One of them was, we've had pilots, testing, bake-offs, demos, seminars, and pictures with stadiums and casinos. But has any of this led to sales? Can we get an announcement and update on sales?
Yeah, sure, absolutely. Look, I'm really happy to say that we have been signing and closing long-term contracts. Would I have liked them sooner and earlier? Absolutely. I think we just closed a nice one yesterday, if I remember correctly. These contracts range in size and they range in significance, right? I expect this trend to continue, right? As we get more and more of these high quality engagements going. Are we going to announce those contracts? Yeah, absolutely. As soon as the customers give us permission to do so. Many of them don't want us to announce it, right? They've got certain things that they keep quiet. As soon as we're approved, right, we'll be announcing those. Have the demos and pilots led to sales? Let's get to the heart of the question. Yes, they have. The pilots and the demos. Let me see. Pilots, demos, photographs, stadiums. What else did you have on the list there, Lisa? Bake-off,
yeah.
bake-off, seminars, right? I want to make sure I get all the list done. They're all part of the multiple sales steps. Like I said, I wish the customer just saw it, said, wow, and wrote a check. It doesn't work that way, right? But again, here's the good news. Again, as I said earlier, you don't get to dance. You don't get invited by the NBA, right, to the summer league with 30 teams, all the chief security officers, all the execs, and they all walk through our gear unless they're serious. The NFL doesn't invite you to go to all the games we've been to unless they're serious, right? These are face-to-face interactions that are part of the process. We're giving our investors a little taste of those things that we can actually show and demonstrate. Others we can't for assorted reasons. All of these are highly productive events that continue to move the yardsticks down, the yardsticks, great analogy, move the yardsticks down the road here as we get to closure with these customers.
Okay. Well, just more specifically, sales prospects and clients, more than 9,000 qualified reseller and end user client leads. How is this working out?
Wow, 9,000. I thought the number was 10, but okay. Let me think about that for a second.
Been more than.
Okay. Frankly, I cringe every time I hear that statement. I heard it the first time I came on board, and it's like, look, let's just be straight up here. 9,000 contact names in a database, or any marketing executive will call them leads, right? That is not 9,000 opportunities that are all working towards contracts, right? It's 9,000 email addresses. Okay. I was the CMO of some very large Fortune 50 companies in my career, right? I can buy a list of 10,000 names, right, and a database of them for like $500. Doesn't mean they're good names, they're just names. Doesn't mean they're interested names, they're just names. To me, what's more important is the quality of the individual opportunities and the value of those opportunities, right? It's more of a quality game, not a volume game, right? And working on the right kinds of opportunities that fit what we want to do. We've implemented a very traditional sales pipeline management process, like to score customers and work them through salesforce.com and kind of track their progress and the steps needed to get to closure, right? We track that every week, right? And so we move from one stage to the next, to the next, to the next. Every successful company on the planet, I don't care if you're IBM, Apple, Dell, startup, everyone does this kind of a process. It's how you run a proper sales organization, right? And quite frankly, this is kind of rigor that we lacked as a company until 2 quarters ago, right? So we now have a really good view on what are quality leads and what are just names on a database.
Great. Thank you for that. So regarding the stadiums where Patriot One has rolled out technology thus far, are these pilot implementations or have the stadiums actually purchased the solution?
It's both. We've got some that are pilots that have moved from like one entry. Okay, let's go do this. Now let's go do this. Now let's go do this. We've got others where we are in the contracting phases right now.
Okay. So your personal effort on positioning Patriot One is being recognized and picking up traction. Have you got the sales team up and running and contributing to support that?
Yeah, I'm pleased with the sales team we have in place. We now have really good sales coverage, across the company, and that team is really gelling really, really well. Some folks may have noticed we've got more recs that we're opening up, and a lot of that is a reflection of, quite frankly, the number of quality opportunities. The word's spreading. We get with one NFL team, they tell 5 more, and they start calling us. And there's only so many hours in the day, so we're expanding the number of folks to give us better coverage and high touch engagement. So you'll see those open recs. I am still very personally engaged in those very strategic accounts because, one, I want to make sure they're getting the very best out of our company. And our sales guys do a fantastic job of that. But there's nuances of conversations that are incredibly important. Those nuances, to me, the feedback you get from the customers, right, and the detail of the feedback and those unique, interesting things they tell you, that helps me ensure that our strategy is perfectly aligned to the market needs and that I can keep influencing our roadmap to be going in the right direction so we can continue to get more and more business. So I'm very involved, but I'm really pleased with the sales team we have right now.
Fantastic. Okay. Well, so once you've broken through and you've gotten traction with the major leagues, what do you see as the next major market to focus on?
For me personally, I think we have an untapped opportunity in VRS. VRS was recently tested by a very large hospital, at their request. We've previously been tested by a second-tier bank with some 2,000, 3,000, 4,000 locations across the country. We've had a bunch of the sports organizations tested out, and there's been really, really good feedback on VRS. And I think about like schools, retail organizations where they might have thousands, for example, grocery stores, healthcare organizations with hundreds of clinics and things like that, right? A gateway screening solution at the entry may not fit right now because these organizations have very, very tight budgets and thousands of locations. And so it's a much longer selling cycle for something like that. But every one of them sees the value and the benefit of something like VRS, get early advanced warning on a potential individual coming into the facility, with a weapon. We saw an unfortunate shooting at Kroger last week, It's those kinds of applications we believe we can solve very well with VRS, right? Now, again, there are places where MSG is going to fit very well and it complements VRS very well, but some customers will prioritize one first over the other or the other first over the other, and they'll complement each other. So for me, I think the next target market is really going to be expansion of our focus on VRS and taking out to this broad mass deployment.
Okay. All right, we're going to switch gears just a bit here. We have numerous questions about the company's financial health and cash flow. So, for example, I understand the pandemic is delaying deals from closing, but I'm concerned about the impact to cash flow. Can you talk about the company's interim capital plan?
Yeah, at this point, our primary goal has always been to drive sales and fund operations through the cash flow from operations, right? Our approach to kind of addressing this question is to focus very specifically on business execution and trying to accelerate and draw things in faster to close more deals and start driving a lot of revenue that's going to serve the cash flow needs, right? I completely understand why any investor would be worried about a company they invest in running out of cash, right? We actively monitor this on a weekly basis. And yes, if, we should think about it, I would consider raising capital or looking to other financial instruments. There's lots of different options here to the extent it's going to help us accelerate the company, right? There are a number of options that are available to us and we're constantly considering those, right? And should we choose to execute on one of those options, we're going to do so in a manner that will maximize the long-term benefit to the company and shareholders. And obviously go through the right approval processes with the board and those kinds of things to ensure the best outcome for the investors.
Okay. Another question, when do you expect to stop receiving COVID relief funding?
Oh, okay, that's an interesting question. It's a good one. Right now, what we've heard is that COVID relief funding is going to end at the end of September, but we've actually heard that previously, that the funding would end and then it got extended and we were actually offered more, which was a nice, pleasant surprise. And so it's been previously extended. It could get extended again. It could end in September. We're going to continue to not only look at COVID funding, but we're going to look for other opportunities and grants and other non-dilutive funding to continue to, help us, quite frankly, address the previous question around cash flow and accelerating investment.
Okay, thanks, Peter. There were also some questions about transparency. So specifically, what measures are you taking to increase transparency on sales and revenue to your investors?
Yeah, so look, we're just now hitting our stride on developing leads and going through the sales process and closing those deals. We're in the first real quarter of closing meaningful deals. And after about 2 quarters of getting very aligned and targeted with the right content, the right messaging, and the right solutions for those marketplaces, right? Trimming unnecessary distractions, and making sure we continue to refine and tighten up the sales process. What I'd like to see is repeatable quarters of bookings and revenues, a lot of stability and a lot of predictability in the revenue. Said another way, I don't want to do a disservice to our investors by just giving them a data point. We sign a large contract and woo, it's great. And the next month we only sign a couple of medium-sized contracts and there's choppiness to our revenues, right? So, it's more important to me to make sure that we report on the bookings over time and show that we've got trends over time, right? And that there's repeatable trends that are very predictable, right? In order to avoid any massive misinterpretation and a disservice to our investors about singular data points. So as we start to get that repeatability, you can start to see more and more transparency and more detail provided in the reporting.
We have another question. Do you plan to amortize the cost of each contract over the life of the initial contract or recognize write-off all costs at the beginning of each contract?
Yeah, great question. That's a pretty simple one to answer. We're governed by accounting standards and principles that we have to follow, right? They dictate how we recognize, revenue and any associated costs of those contracts. And so look, if you think about it, there's kind of 2 ways things play out, right? In simple terms, for a subscription contract we've signed, we're going to recognize revenue and the associated costs kind of in alignment with the life of the contract. For upfront purchases, and ongoing maintenance renewals, we're going to recognize the revenue and the costs along with the upfront, contract structure, and we'll recognize the cost of the service maintenance over the time. So it's fairly basic accounting principles.
Peter, we have a number of questions on uplisting to the NASDAQ. Do you want to talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, so this question has come up quite a bit, not only from our investors, various other folks. Personally, I like the idea of uplisting to the NASDAQ for some of the reasons I talked about earlier. I want to open up the aperture of people who are aware of and interested in investing in Patriot One, right? by uplifting to the NASDAQ, that opens us up to a much broader group of potential investors, both retail and institutional investors, particularly in the US, right? What we're finding is not a lot of investment outside of kind of our geography. However, look, there's a number of regulatory requirements in order to uplist. You need a minimum share price, excuse me. You've got various filings, you've got financial reporting that's got to be done in certain styles and structures and things like that. It's not a simple matter of going, oh, I'm going to do a reverse stock split. And my desire would be, we're uplisting based on the value we've created, right? For me personally, I want to drive the value of the company over long terms, right? And that's going to drive the stock price, which will afford us the opportunity and the choice to uplist should we choose to uplist. Again, excuse me, as I said previously, my focus is like the long-term continued growth of the company with a lot of predictability and a lot of stability. I'm not a fan of quick hits. I'm not a fan of false promises. I'm not a fan of stock manipulation, right? Or financial engineering or marketing just the stock and getting a lot of hype around it, right? I'm focused on long-term growth and long-term predictable benefit. I want to be Apple, not GameStop.
Excellent. Thank you for that. We also have a number of questions about international expansion. So first, are you planning to sell your products abroad? And if so, when and would you do so through resellers?
Yeah, right now the business focus on the US and Canada. The market opportunity is huge right here in our backyard. And it's much easier for us as a small company to serve that market right here, right? I can get to 5 customers in 3 days here in the US much faster than I can get to 1 customer in Europe, right? If we spread ourselves too thin, trying to serve too many markets with too many products and too many geographies, even with international partners and resellers, right? In the process, we'll try and be everything to everyone and result in being suboptimal to everyone. So I don't want to do that. We will consider opportunities that are brought to us, right, through international partners, right? If they present them to us directly or through quality partners, you know, if it's a good fit for us and not a significant distraction to the company. You know, we have to balance the fact that the cost to sell internationally, the cost to support post-sale sell, you know, even with very strong local partners, it's significantly higher than the cost to support domestically. With the amount of opportunity that's right here in front of us, let's get focused on what's right here in our backyard. It's on our doorstep. Let's go pick it up and go grab it.
Okay. There were a number of questions that revolved around partnerships. So, for example, have any signed partners or resellers sold any of our product yet?
Yeah, I'm really pleased. You know, we've signed a handful of deals with our partners in the last, I want to say, 2 months or so, right? And in fact, this fiscal quarter, a very large partner just signed a very large manufacturing company. So very pleased with that. Others are in progress with the partners. And in fact, some of the partners, as we've gone through a reevaluation of those partners, some of them are incredibly active right now. I think we had to you know, tighten up how we trained them on what made a good customer to go target. And so we're seeing the benefits of that now.
Okay. And finally, there were several questions submitted with regard to the product. First up, a question on DHS certification, and more specifically, can you provide an update on the MSG DH certification? How does this affect your business with the Cincinnati Reds Great American Ballpark, for example, and other customers who may require DHS certification?
So look, it's a great question about DHS. You know, that process is underway, but I think as I mentioned earlier, the DHS is way behind in the process. What would normally take a fairly short period of time is very, very lengthy these days. So rather than just kind of waiting and kind of twiddling our thumbs, what we decided to do was undertake a number of other certifications with a number of third-party organizations. I mentioned the red teaming with the NBA earlier this month, and those reports came out very, very well, highlighting that we are, in fact, much more secure than the current technologies that have been used, right? We're going through all sorts of other certifications to provide, you know, a long list of third-party validations. These have shown that we are DHS Safety Act certifiable, and we've gone through all the right steps to get certified. We're now kind of waiting on the DHS to finish their work, right? So we're going to have to work through and wait through that process a little bit. In the meantime, we're going to continue to demonstrate our solutions, you know, show that our security solutions are actually an improvement over the current walk-through metal detector standards used by the leagues, right? And address that. Specific to the part about the Reds that you asked, Lisa, and the investor asked, look, when the Reds came out of, I think we talked about this the last investor webinar, when they came out of COVID and they kind of reopened the park and they started their season, their sole focus was on managing the reopening and dealing with all the COVID requirements and the protocols that were set out by the league. were unvaccinated people allowed in or not? If they were vaccinated, do they have to have proof of vaccination? These kinds of things. It's complex for them, particularly when they've never ever done it before and they don't have trained people, they don't have systems. How do I deal with some people having cards, not having cards, false cards, this kind of stuff. I actually am meeting with the Reds this week. And we're going to renew and reopen our discussions. Now that we're getting to the end of the season, it's a perfect time for us to say, okay, now you're going to the off season. Let's renew those conversations.
Okay. A few more questions about product. We're going to change gears a bit.
Okay.
What is the status of VRS Suite?
Look, we've had an excellent opportunity, as I think I mentioned earlier, to kind of show VRS to a bunch of feedback, to cover a bunch of customers. Feedback has been great. It's been really good. Like anything, a couple of false positives, but so little that customers are very excited about deploying them. I'm particularly impressed with kind of the customer interface and how it's kind of been seamlessly integrated into our MSG solution. So customers can get more of a holistic view on their overall security kind of performance.
Great. Okay. What is directional alerting referred to in the MSG enhancement press release, and why is it important?
Directional alerting, real simple. I can alert on the way in, I can alert on the way out, I can alert on both directions if we want. Some stadiums have come to us and said the uniqueness of how they do ingress and egress for not just spectators, but others who visit their venue, they need to have a choice and flexibility. It's a small little nuance, but it was very, very important to a whole bunch of different stadiums. So we deliver the feature.
Okay. How about, would you share your thoughts on Patriot One's competitors? I've noticed some information on a company called Evolve Technologies, and I would welcome any information you could provide showing how Patriot One's products are competitive or perhaps even better than Evolve's products.
This is where I want to say something, Lisa, like Evolve. Evolve who? I could also say something like, we don't have any competitors if you really get down to what has to be detected in order to keep a stadium safe. Okay, we meet that detection, others do not. Let's be more frank about this. So instead of kind of, pithy commentary, I like having a competitor in the industry. In fact, I wish there were more, to be quite honest, which seems a little counterintuitive. It validates that there's a need and it validates the industry, right? And actually helps accelerate interest by customers, right? And awareness by all the prospects in the marketplace. Everyone knows that before making a major purchase decision to reinvent my stadium around a new kind of technology, I'm going to go out and do my homework. I'm going to go do a Google search. I'm going to go find out, well, if there's this one company, there must be others, and who do they find? A year ago, anyone doing that Google search probably wouldn't have found Patriot One. Today they do. We're actually getting a lot of inbound interest because of that. As I said, I think a little bit before, we've done a lot of third-party bake-offs. Customers making a buying decision have decided, let's go exercise and test the heck out of these technologies. We won those. So I'm very, very pleased that we stand apart from anybody else in terms of the efficacy of our solution to detect weapons and threats to a business. Okay, we're second to none, right? I will give Evolve credit where it's due. They have an advantage over us in terms of timing. They started the company a few years before ours, right? And so they got that head start in terms of awareness and branding, right? But like, what is that saying to go? We're number two. We try harder. And the feedback that we've heard from everyone we're engaged with is they actually see us on a much better trajectory at a higher velocity and pace. So I'm pleased with where we're positioned. Great.
Thank you so much, Peter. That brings us to the end in terms of questions and timing. Is there anything else you'd like to leave the viewers with today before we sign off?
Yeah. Wow. Every day, every week, every month, I just become more and more and more positive on the future for the company. I sit in a venue like this. Like I said, I'm looking around. You've got camera crews. You got all sorts of amazing events going on. This is going to be a big week for us. And when I look back kind of 90 days ago, and I think about the kind of the nature and the tone of the conversations, we wouldn't be sitting in a stadium, right? We wouldn't be having the kinds of conversations and the phone calls that, we're on every single day, right? Those first conversations with customers was kind of a little bit of, Patriot who, right? We're now in these really interesting, tight engagements that are very open, right? We've come a long, long way in a short time, and I'm really pleased with that. I'm like very, very comfortable that we're kind of turning the corner right? And the investors are going to be pleased with kind of the trajectory we're on. We're at that inflection point, and there'll be a lot of upcoming announcements over the course of probably about the next 45 to 60 days or so that I think the investors are going to be pleased with. You know, if all continues to go well, and of course, if we get the permission to announce those from those organizations. Now, I'm not kidding myself. We'll start announcing these things. There'll be a lot of people who are very pleased. And I know my phone's going to ring off the hook with investors saying, how much more can you do? How much more can you do? Come on, let's go. Pick it up. So, hey, that's the reality. I encourage the investors to think about like where we were 8 months ago, right? When we started on this journey together, you know, me and them and the team, right? My executive team, my sales organization, things like that, right? And think of the state of the company then, right? And where we are now in terms of the quality environment and quality engagement that we have, and like the product that's being evaluated today and getting high visibility, right? The team recognizes that it's for us to now convert all this work and all this investment into the closed contracts that our investors are kind of clamoring for, right? And I can assure you, right, nobody cares more about sales and those results than me, right? And like we're driving hard aggressively to keep on a pace unlike anything I've ever seen before because the market's right there asking for us. I appreciate everyone's continued support in Patriot One. I appreciate your support in what we're doing and where I'm trying to drive this company. And like we're looking forward, and I'm really looking forward to be able to deliver back the wins to the investors who have given us their faith and trust for certainly this last 8 months and more beyond that. So thank you, Lisa.
Thank you, Peter. Thanks for your time and for your insight. Very much appreciated.
Okay. Thanks so much. We'll talk to everyone soon, and thanks for attending today.